let's talk about the social health aspect because and I want to get and I love that in each chapter, you kind of have this running in parallel.
Yes.
So even when you were speaking to the other aspects of health in other chapters, there was an aspect of that social health that kept coming in.
Yeah.
Because, and I think for me, it's an area that I struggled with, and I love this chapter because we kind of always forget that your environment impacts.
Yeah.
It impacts you a lot. The people you hang around with. So having that awareness and intelligence to say, who do I have in my circle, my space? And people struggle with this because it means having a lot of boundaries with people. And sometimes those people may be family. And you talk a little bit about that, friendships that ended and then evolved. And for somebody who's navigating, because, black tax and all that stuff, you're kind of taught systems to say, no, that's your uncle. How would you advise?
And cultural nuances play a big role as well.
And I just want you to take us through that process of saying, this is how then I shift through some of these relationships for my benefit, for my health. Because I think there was a lot of nuggets that came out of that chapter in managing social health.
For sure. Look, I think how I would respond to this lies on how you asked the question. Because in arriving to the question, you then said, navigating for my benefit. Because I think that's where the nuance then is introduced to say, you yourself need to do a bit of an introspection and an analysis, and interrogate the relationships. And sometimes it's not something you're able to do in the immediate. It's almost like you and I have an interaction. And tomorrow I realize, why am I off, man? Why did, do I not feel like I was added on to my cup is less? And it's only once doing that intimate analysis that you then, trace it back to say, oh, it's because when we had this interaction, this is how it felt. This is what left me. And I say, if you're not able to change the nature, the DNA of a relationship, the thing that you have absolute control of is you.
Yourself,
so you then determine what those terms are.
Hi.
How are you?
Good.
Lovely.
I get the feeling that we're going to get like a...
Absolutely. I honestly just brought my copy to parade, but I know you have one.
Yeah. And actually, I spent the week going through the book.
Right.
And what I noticed, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, because when you get through just before the first chapter, it almost felt like a release, like you were releasing a lot of things that are on your mind, your journey and everything. Almost like a cathartic release or shadow work, for lack of a better word. And I kind of get the feeling like at some point somebody must have said, whoa, stop there a little bit. We need to, you can't say that. Did it feel like it was like a therapy of sorts to be able to navigate some of the things that you had experienced and then find a way to give back in terms of helping people navigate their own experiences? Tell me what that felt like writing the book.
So to be completely honest with you, my first book was significantly more cathartic. That's where I really poured out my vulnerabilities, my honesties. So this, by the time I did the second book, which is To Health With It, I feel like I had already kind of done the exercise, but I had to revisit it to give context to where I'm trying to go with it. So for instance, if I am to speak on physical health, I do need to first give you a picture of what inspired the journey, and then share what I learned on my way and my pursuit to physical health. And by the way, I don't claim to have mastered any of these healths, but in order for me to connect with you and to be personable, I have to also share my vulnerabilities and imperfections and give context, and then we try and build upon that together.
Yeah. Is that a difficult thing to do, to be open in such a way, knowing that so many people are going to read it and read into your experiences?
Yes.
Is it easy for you to be that vulnerable?
Look, I think what made it easier was because it was my second go at it.
Yeah.
And, when I did it the first time, my anxiety was on maximum.
Yeah.
Because now you are really laying bare. You are sort of opening yourself up to interrogation and scrutiny and misunderstanding. But when that was received as well as it was, I realized that there's a hunger for all of us to connect on that kind of level.
Yeah.
And so it was a pleasant surprise to discover how, if you share genuinely with no motives, or you're not kind of setting up traps for anyone, but you're just kind of sharing vulnerably.
Yeah.
The response is with the same level of vulnerability, and they connect with you on that kind of level. Mind you, I noticed, as I was going through my own life experiences, people would often make contact, via whatever avenues or social media, or when you interact with them in person.
Yeah.
And they would share something that suggests that they too have a longing to have these kind of engagements.
Yeah.
So I kind of got the sense that many of us, if not all of us, really just kind of long to have these conversations freely. So to put it in a book, it's almost like trying to create an environment where we can speak freely. And in order for that to happen, you have to be the first, set the platform. Yeah.
And I think that I love that, because as I was going through it, I was engaging with the different chapters.
Yes.
And finding spots where I was like,
Yeah.
I resonate with that.
Yeah.
I've been through something
go.
similar. And I may have navigated it differently,
Yeah.
but this gives me another perspective. And I think that's why I want to touch on chapter 3, which speaks to emotional health.
Yes.
And I think a lot of us struggle with that.
Yeah.
And especially because emotional health is so important in balance. Even when you're trying to balance with the other aspects of health,
Yes.
you have to start it internally and
For sure.
mentally.
Yeah.
And I kind of I want to get the feel of how you had to navigate that. Was it a morning you woke up and said, I need therapy, I need to get my mind? Where would somebody start if they're trying to say, I want to get myself in check now, as in lay a good foundation to be able to at least be mentally and emotionally healthy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. So I would like to kind of zoom out for a second and maybe take one step back. I love that you were able to pick up that the approach is holistic.
Yeah.
And for me, what drew attention to otherwise overlooked aspects of our health, like emotional health and all that, was when I was thinking of myself as a holistic being. And as soon as I started addressing some aspects, I realized what's holding me back is some of the underserviced parts of my being.
Past people don't see.
Exactly. So for instance, you would get into a gym, just to get pragmatic with it, and work on your physical health, and you're on the treadmill and you're running and you're lifting and you're doing what you got to do, but you don't come out with the satisfaction that you're hoping for. You realize, look, the cages are shedding, but I'm still unhappy. I still have a poor relationship with my family. I'm still making poor financial decisions. I have a lousy social circle, which I still do, by the way. I've got a terrible social life, but I'm working on it.
Yeah.
And so when you kind of realize that overemphasizing on one and overlooking another, it still leaves for an imbalanced kind of life. That's when you're forced to zero in on each compartment. So by the time I arrived at introspecting and really interrogating my emotional health, it was concurrently to the other aspects of my health. And I think I was able to service it that way, because you don't have to work on it alone.
Yes.
Also, you can develop it to a certain part, whether it's from, seeing an expert or consulting or engaging, connecting with somebody or confiding in somebody. You can also kind of park it to a point and then visit your spiritual health in the interim. And you realize by doing this, this is also, serving this one here. So I was kind of enjoying how everything was lending to the other aspect. And I love that. And I also love that you can be in shambles with one aspect of your health, right? Complete chaos where you're just not getting it right.
Yeah.
But what you can do is you sort of make it something that you can live with, you can tolerate, you can manage, because you are in the meantime servicing other aspects of your health.
Yes, and I think you talk about it in the book, because there's aspect where life happens.
Yes.
And your career has
Constantly.
taken you to in spaces where maybe you don't have time for gym.
Yes.
And that's where then the mental aspect then brings
supplements.
you in.
Yeah, exactly.
And you need to lean into that. And I like that.
Yes,
And you talk about spirituality a bit. And I love that you're not being prescriptive, because it's such a personal journey.
Indeed.
And I'd love to knock on that door.
Yes, let's do it.
Because it's almost like you are open in terms of other beliefs and faiths, but what does spirituality mean to you, and what are those paths that you've brought together to say, you know what, this is where I am and I'm comfortable with it, even though I'm still navigating the journey.
Yes. So spirituality has taken such an interesting form and has evolved. Because it started off with my understanding with my connection to a higher power, whatever that looks like for anyone, right? And it's kind of progressively morphed into more an understanding of, of my position in the world, my value proposition, how I connect with the life I live, whether it's in the form of people I interact with, spaces that I'm in, vocations that I'm a part of, pursuits that I aspire to, and just kind of thinking of what my place is in that world, what my value proposition is in that space, what that sort of does for my purpose in life, the impression I try and leave, the impact I try and have, but also having an awareness of, how I sort of draw from somebody else, the people I connect with, the spaces I connect with, what impact that has on my spirituality and my sense of being, my sense of being, a member of society. And that's kind of where spirituality has taken me. Which has become less about my belief system and a little bit more about my significance.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I get it, because I think you reference growing up, and I think a lot of us grew up in the same way. There's a church faith or religion at some point, and you are kind of brought up into it. You have no choice. We're going to church, we're going to Sunday, you are going to Sunday school, or whatever that looks like for different families. And I think it gets to a point, at some point you're like, does this work for me? Not a lot of people get that opportunity to reflect. They just feel their discomfort of the misalignment to say, I was taught this, but now it's not really working, but I'm now just going. And you get a lot of people that experience that. And I think it's beautiful that you share your story that gives the person just the moment to reflect and say, maybe there's something else out there.
Not to mention, if I may add, I also find that when you sort of are brought up in a sort of prescriptive environment, right? With that, the byproduct of it is you also told what to be against.
Yes, very much.
Right? And then life sort of exposes us to a plethora of options. And then you suddenly realize, wait a minute, but now, if that's their path, and that's their path, but I was told this is my path and my path only, and I need to reject these. But then you kind of get exposed. So you realize that, you know what, it becomes less about, what philosophy or belief system you have, but rather what value you bring to life, and to each other and to society at large. And I think that's, for me, starts taking credence over a prescriptive route.
Yeah. And there's something I want to quote, I think, in the chapter where you speak about spirituality.
Yeah.
Because I think it connects to then somebody's perspective of what do I need to gauge as success. Not just spirituality, but maybe in other aspects of health, as you speak to them in the book. But not verbatim, but it felt like you felt you had failed as a musician.
Yes.
And hence it kind of pushed you into what are the things that I can do, and your entry into your different boards and what.
Yeah.
And for me, the question was, were you really not successful?
Yes.
If then you were able to pivot into other spaces so that other people don't experience what you experience. So then what becomes the measure of success when you look at spirituality, when you look at mental health and so forth?
Yeah.
I don't know. Has it changed from you writing the book?
Yeah, from that point.
Yes. Yeah. So what does success look like then when you embark on a journey like this?
For sure.
Yeah.
Look, it's firstly a brilliant question, but also the way you're asking it, again, shows your brilliance. Because for me, that reframing has given me sort of a newfound appreciation for what's otherwise considered failure.
Yeah.
So, failure by the rudimentary understanding would be, I got little to no immediate returns from music itself. But you can argue that from it, one was able to build, many other things.
Yeah.
So in that regard, then I think it was a massive success. And I could even argue that even the failure itself, because it stimulated a thinking in new directions, that in itself was a catalyst for joys to be enjoyed elsewhere. So yes, I do find that in real time, I am reframing that myself as I'm getting a greater understanding. So maybe at the time of writing, my feeling was, man, I failed. I'll never do that again.
Yeah.
And this, that, and the other. But I think as we grow, as we develop as humans every single day, we sort of start getting a greater understanding of what role that played in where you are now.
Yeah. And I think it speaks to something that you mentioned before we started. And I like that because it did kind of switch a light bulb on for me, in that you maybe start something like school. You gave me an example of doing a degree and so forth. And then you kind of want to abandon it because you've completed it. Not understanding that that sets the foundation. There's things that you learned there that you can then move into a different sphere. And I love that. And I felt that the music career, though it was 5 albums later, it felt like, where's the money? It taught you other things. And I think that's a lesson that people can take away to say, don't park everything that you've learned. Find the gold nuggets in it and take it into another sphere when you're pivoting. So what are we pivoting to now? And that is the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, firstly, that's a constant thing.
Yeah.
We're constantly evolving and growing. And for me, I find that constant seeking of new to be so exciting. In other words, I'm enjoying the journey so much that I don't always have a pinpointed end direction, a goal.
Destination.
No, but I find I enjoy the pursuit thereof. It's like I enjoy finding a new map, following this new map and whatever. And I probably enjoy that more than I do finding the treasure at the end of it.
Yeah.
Because even by the time you get there, immediately you want to know, okay, what's the next adventure? It's like doing a puzzle, doing like a 1,000-piece puzzle. Yeah. Sometimes the doing it is more fun than the finishing it. Then you put on the last piece. Yeah, all right, it's a picture.
The anticlimax.
Yes, that's not where the pleasure is, right?
Yeah.
So without now evading and trying to be philosophical about the answer, I am on an intentional personal development journey, and right now it's taken a form of academic pursuit. So, man, the first half of my life, assuming that I'm at the half mark, I had zero interest. It just was not for me. I couldn't tell you, man. I just had a resistance to it, But it's so interesting that, as soon as, like a book, I guess, as soon as you read the first paragraph, and then it gets exciting. Before you know it, you hooked. Now you can't put it down. Now you're, that's kind of what my academic journey has been about. And I have found it so transformative, so meaningful. And I love seeing how it's having a knock-on effect on other things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I get it.
So in the past, as an example, in my work, I would just get booked to compare or to host or to MC some kind of function. Now, I find that they can hear my perspective, thoughts and perspectives
Yes.
on
This is a script
things.
and stick to this line. Yeah.
And I find that shift so interesting.
Yeah.
Because I can see it happening real time.
Yeah.
And I think that's the position that personal development has put me in, where I feel like I can now engage meaningfully. It's not to say you now suddenly have all the answers, but what studies teach you to do is to go find information, to go compare sometimes even opposing notes, and to draw then a view from that.
Yeah.
And I love that.
And
I get so high off it.
You then add on to knowledge in that way. Because
And you add on to knowledge.
Yes. And let's talk about the social health aspect, because and I want to get and I love that in each chapter, you kind of have this running in parallel.
Yes.
So even when you were speaking to the other aspects of health in other chapters, there was an aspect of that social health that kept coming in.
Yeah.
Because, and I think for me, it's an area that I struggled with, and I love this chapter because we kind of always forget that your environment impacts.
Yeah.
It impacts you a lot. The people you hang around with. So having that awareness and intelligence to say, who do I have in my circle, my space? And people struggle with this because it means having a lot of boundaries with people. And sometimes those people may be family. And you talk a little bit about that, friendships that ended and then evolved.
Yeah.
And for somebody who's navigating, because, black text and all that stuff, you're kind of taught systems to say, no, that's your uncle.
Yeah.
Yeah. How would you advise?
And cultural nuances play a big role as well.
Yeah. And I just want you to take us through that process of saying, this is how then I shift through some of these relationships for my benefit, for my health. Because I think there was a lot of nuggets that came out of that chapter in managing social health.
For sure.
Yeah.
Look, I think how I would respond to this lies on how you asked the question. Because in arriving to the question, you then said, navigating for my benefit.
Yeah.
Because I think that's where the nuance then is introduced, to say you yourself need to do a bit of an introspection and an analysis.
Yeah.
And interrogate the relationships. And sometimes it's not something you're able to do in the immediate. It's almost like you and I have an interaction. And tomorrow I realize, why am I off, man? Why did, do I not feel like I was added on to my cup is less?
Yeah.
And it's only once doing that intimate analysis that you then, trace it back to say, oh, it's because when we had this interaction, this is how it felt. This is what it left me. And I say, if you're not able to change the nature, the DNA of a relationship, the thing that you have absolute control of is you.
Yourself.
So you then determine what those terms are of those relationships. You as much as, yes, it's family, or we are beholden to these relationships because they date back and all that. We are ultimate custodians of our own well-being. And so we take the steering wheel to say, I henceforth dictate the terms of how this interaction is going to go, because I have to look after number one. I can only look after number two if number one is taken care of. So for my own, whether it's mental health and my own well-being, I need to now introduce either these boundaries or whatever that looks like. But there have to be redefinitions and renegotiation of the terms of engagement.